My sister-in-law asked my husband to be her backup baby daddy. Now she's furious, I found out. So here's the wild situation I just found myself in. I'm still reeling a bit, so bear with me. My husband, Dylan, and I have been married for 3 years. We're both in our early 30s, and things have been great between us. Then last week, while I was tidying up, I found a notebook of Dylan's tucked away in his nightstand. Now, I don't usually snoop, but the notebook looked out of place. I opened it, and right there on one of the pages was a list, an actual, organized list, of qualities he thinks would make someone a good parent. Next to that was a list of, wait for it, potential backup dad duties. Reading further, I realized this list wasn't about us or any hypothetical plans we'd discussed. Instead, it was related to his sister, Claire. I was dumbfounded and immediately felt this sinking feeling that I wasn't meant to find this. Once Dylan got home, I just straight up asked him what the notebook was about. At first, he looked surprised, then sheepish, before finally admitting that Claire, his 35-year-old sister, had approached him a few months ago with a serious favor. She'd confided that she was feeling the ticking clock about wanting kids and had been nervous about never finding Mr. Right to start a family with. And her grand solution? She wanted Dylan to be her backup baby daddy. She'd apparently gone as far as asking if he'd consider helping her have a baby, either by being a donor or even a co-parent if she wasn't partnered by a certain age. To say I was floored is an understatement. I asked him if he'd actually considered this, and he said he hadn't outright dismissed it because he didn't want to hurt Claire's feelings. He claimed he wasn't seriously considering it, but was trying to listen to her and be supportive. I couldn't believe he didn't shut this down immediately. I mean, why wasn't his first response to tell her that this wasn't something he could do out of respect for our marriage? Instead, he kept her request under wraps, thinking it had never come up, and didn't even mention it to me. And to be clear, this wasn't just a random idea Claire had one time and let go of. She apparently had plans and deadlines mapped out for when she'd need him to help. When I asked why he hadn't told me about it, he admitted he thought it would blow over and that she'd dropped the idea. He said he didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be. Well, I explained that it became a huge deal once he chose to keep it secret and considered, even briefly, something so significant without my knowledge. That's a level of partnership and intimacy that felt like it should be ours, not something he even entertains with someone else, even if she's his sister. He argued that he never seriously entertained it, and that it was just Claire's weird way of coping with her fears. But then it got worse. After our conversation, I felt unsettled and ended up talking to my mum about it, just to sort out my feelings. I guess word got back to Claire, because the next day, she showed up at our house, furious. She said she couldn't believe I was sticking my nose into her personal plans, and that Dylan's agreement or lack thereof was nobody's business but theirs. I told her calmly that I felt I had every right to know, considering the implications. But Claire dug in, accusing me of blowing everything out of proportion and insisting she was only asking her brother as a last resort. She insisted that she wasn't trying to replace me or cross boundaries, but that she'd needed someone she trusted, and Dylan was her choice. The conversation went in circles, with Claire accusing me of not understanding the pressure women face when they feel their time to have children is running out. I tried to sympathize. I understand wanting kids and feeling panicked about it. But I also pointed out that, as the wife in this situation, I feel like there's a huge boundary being trampled here. Claire didn't get it. She actually left more upset, saying I was selfish and unreasonable for not letting her have a backup plan. Now Dylan's stuck in the middle. He keeps saying he's sorry for not telling me sooner and that he understands why I'm upset. But he also keeps defending Claire's perspective, saying she's scared and feels pressured. He claims he's just trying to help her keep her options open. But it's hard for me to see this as anything but disrespectful to our relationship. So now things are tense between us. Claire hasn't spoken to me since that argument and won't pick up calls from Dylan either, which has him feeling guilty. He's caught between not wanting to hurt his sister and feeling guilty for what he put me through. Part of me thinks I should have let him handle this with Claire, but the other part of me feels totally justified in reacting the way I did. Am I blowing this up? Should I have taken a softer approach? Because honestly, the whole situation feels surreal. Update 10 days later. So things have definitely been eventful since my last post, and I appreciate all the feedback. I've tried to sort through all the emotions and advice, and I've had a few conversations that have helped me understand more of what's going on. There were also some questions that came up, so I'll clarify a few things here. After the initial confrontation with Claire, I decided to sit down with Dylan again and dig deeper into how he feels about this entire situation, including his relationship with Claire and how they communicate. What surprised me was how genuinely torn he seemed. He's always been close with his family, especially Claire, who he feels a protective duty toward as her younger brother. I know their bond is important to him, and I wouldn't want to come between that. But honestly, hearing how hard this has been for him doesn't fully soften the blow for me. In our talk, I asked him to clarify what he'd meant by not wanting to hurt her feelings when she first brought up this backup baby plan. He explained that he's always felt like Claire relies on him emotionally, and that, growing up, he often tried to make life easier for her. As he put it, she's faced a lot of challenges in past relationships, and he'd felt that supporting her in any way he could was just part of his role as her brother. I do understand this loyalty, but I pointed out to him that there's a huge difference between being emotionally supportive and agreeing to a major family decision without consulting his wife. I asked him if he ever really considered going through with it, and he insists he didn't, but I still feel like he was holding back, hoping she'd never press the issue. Dylan explained that when Claire first brought it up, he was taken by surprise and didn't want to dismiss her outright because he thought she was in a vulnerable state. He honestly believed that this was more of a passing idea and didn't think she'd ever be serious about it. However, he now sees why that might have been naive, considering Claire had even mapped out possible timelines. But when I asked him why he didn't tell me immediately, he admitted that he felt it wasn't real enough yet to bring to me and that he didn't want to worry me over nothing. He's admitted now that keeping me in the dark was a mistake, even if he never intended to hurt me. We've been going to couples counseling since all of this started, which has honestly helped. Our therapist has been a great mediator, allowing us to air out our perspectives without fear of hurting the other person and really helping me understand why Dylan reacted the way he did. Dylan says he truly realizes now that keeping secrets from me, even if he thought he was protecting me, is not the answer. He's promised that if anything even remotely similar comes up again, he'll bring it to me first, no hesitation. But then there's the Claire side of this whole mess. As I mentioned before, she's still not speaking to me. She won't respond to calls or texts from either of us, and Dylan's visibly upset about that. He hates this rift, but he says he feels stuck between wanting to patch things up with her and respecting my boundaries. It's been tense, but we're working through it. Now, for some clarification, because a lot of you asked, Claire had brought up the idea as a backup, not as her primary plan. Apparently, she's worried that by the time she meets someone she wants to settle down with, she might not be able to have kids. According to Dylan, she framed it as a just-in-case scenario, hoping that Dylan would keep the option open if she reached a certain age without having kids. She even tried to make it sound casual, saying it would be great to have someone she trusted to help her out in this way. But for me, it still feels like such an inappropriate thing to ask. It's like she sees Dylan as some kind of just add water solution to her future family, without acknowledging how it impacts our marriage. As for my relationship with Claire, it's definitely strained. I'll admit that I'm still angry with her for assuming it was fine to ask such a thing without even thinking of how I'd feel. But I can also see, thanks to therapy, that this anger is mixed with sadness over the whole situation. Claire and I were never super close, but I did care about her and tried to be a supportive sister-in-law, so feeling this blindsided is tough. Dylan and I decided that we need to set boundaries, not just with Claire but in general. It's clear that we have different ideas of what healthy boundaries mean, and this situation brought that to light. Going forward, we agreed that anything that might affect both of us emotionally or mentally needs to be shared, no exceptions. And I told him that, in future, if there's ever a request from Claire that impacts us this deeply, I need him to prioritize our marriage, even if it's uncomfortable for him. There was one last edit I wanted to make based on some comments. Dylan has now agreed to talk to Claire with a firmer stance on this. We've been working on what he'll say, and he plans to emphasize that while he loves her and understands her worries, he cannot entertain this backup idea, and that he feels it's inappropriate and harmful to our relationship. He's hoping she'll understand, but he's also prepared to be patient if it takes her a while to come around. That's where we are now. I don't know if Claire will accept this or if things will get even messier, but for now, I'm glad Dylan is showing he's on my side and willing to make this right. Hopefully, in time, we can all move forward from this. Update 2 about a month later. So, after weeks of silence and tense exchanges, Claire finally responded. But unfortunately, it didn't go quite as I'd hoped. Dylan reached out to her one last time to set things straight, explaining that he couldn't be her backup without damaging his own marriage, and that the entire situation had deeply affected both me and our relationship with her. He reminded her that he cared about her and wanted her to find happiness, but that he couldn't, in good conscience, agree to a role that would compromise the trust in his own marriage. Claire listened, but it didn't exactly seem to soften her stance. She told Dylan she felt abandoned and said that she had only asked him because she trusted him more than anyone else. She claimed that if she'd known this would blow up in such a big way, she would have never brought it up in the first place. Her tone made it sound as if we were somehow overreacting or taking things out of proportion, which was frustrating because, from my point of view, this wasn't a simple favor. It was a huge ask that crossed so many boundaries. I could tell Dylan was disappointed. He'd really hoped Claire would understand how this hurt us both and would take some responsibility for her actions. The one positive outcome was that Dylan made his position crystal clear to her. He said that any future family-related decisions that might affect his marriage needed to involve me from the start. He assured her that it wasn't just about siding with his wife, but about protecting the integrity of his own relationship and not placing himself in a situation that could harm me or his marriage. I felt so grateful that he didn't just pin this all on me or make it seem like I was the reason he couldn't help her. He handled it in a way that was honest and respectful, but also showed where his priorities stood. After that talk, Dylan and I decided that we needed to take a bit of space from Claire, not out of resentment, but just for our own well-being. We figured that a little distance would give all of us time to process and hopefully prevent any further friction. We're not cutting her off completely, but we're keeping things on a more superficial level for the time being. We've told her we're here if she truly needs us, but that we need time to focus on us and create a boundary that feels safe and respectful for everyone. In the meantime, Dylan and I have continued our counseling sessions, and they've really helped us come out of this stronger as a couple. It's been so validating to have a professional affirm that setting boundaries in situations like this is normal and necessary. Through therapy, we've been able to talk about why this situation affected us both so much, and I've even started to understand Claire's motivations a bit better, even if I don't agree with them. I can see that she's lonely and scared about the future, and that this was her way of trying to secure a family connection. Still, that doesn't excuse the way she handled it, but at least I can see a bit more of her side. There's no perfect ending here, but I do feel a sense of relief. Claire seems to understand that we're not budging on this, even if she's upset about it. I'm hoping that with time and space, we can all move on from this situation and get back to a healthier, less tense relationship with her. In the end, I'm just grateful that Dylan and I are on the same page, and that we're both committed to putting our marriage first.